Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Jack Leva stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below like distant stars. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced death and emerged victorious more times than he cared to count. His marriage to Christina Reeves had been the prize he'd claimed after retiring from 15 years as a Navy SEAL. 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and countless classified missions that would never see the light of day. Christina had been everything he dreamed of during those cold nights in Afghanistan and Iraq. Beautiful, intelligent, and seemingly devoted. She ran a successful interior design firm that catered to the city's elite, while Jack had transitioned into private security consulting for high-profile clients. Their life appeared perfect from the outside. A power couple with a sprawling penthouse, expensive cars, and a social circle that included judges, politicians, and business moguls. But Jack had learned in the military that appearances could be deadly deceptions. The first crack in his perfect world had appeared 6 months ago. Christina's late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. Her sudden interest in his schedule, asking detailed questions about his travel plans and client meetings. The way she'd started working out obsessively, buying new lingerie that she never wore for him. Jack's training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct screamed that something was wrong. So he'd done what any former SEAL would do. He'd started gathering intelligence. The surveillance equipment he'd installed was military-grade, invisible to anyone without specialized training. The GPS tracker on her car was undetectable. The financial monitoring software he discreetly installed on their shared accounts painted a picture he didn't want to see. Cash withdrawals at odd hours. Hotel charges when she claimed to be at the office. Phone records showing hundreds of calls to a number registered to Morgan Broom, the city's chief of police, and a man Jack had considered a friend. Tonight, as Jack watched Christina sleeping peacefully beside him, he knew the reconnaissance phase was over. Tomorrow, he would confront the evidence he gathered. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal. His phone buzzed with a text from his security company's monitoring service. Motion detected at warehouse office, 11:47 p.m. Jack frowned. His private office in the converted warehouse district was equipped with state-of-the-art security. No one should be there at this hour, and Christina was lying right next to him. Or she. He reached over and gently touched her shoulder. The figure didn't stir. Jack pulled back the covers and found pillows arranged to mimic a sleeping form. The woman he'd been watching sleep was an illusion. His blood ran cold as the implications hit him. Christina wasn't just cheating. She was actively deceiving him with a level of sophistication that suggested this wasn't a simple affair. Jack moved with the silent efficiency of his former profession, dressing in dark clothing and grabbing his tactical gear from the hidden safe. Whatever was happening at his office, he intended to be prepared for it. As he drove through the empty streets, Jack's mind raced through possibilities. The warehouse district was isolated, perfect for activities that required privacy. His office contained sensitive information about his clients, financial records, and security protocols. If Christina and Morgan were planning something, they would need access to his professional life to execute it. The warehouse came into view, and Jack killed his headlights, coasting to a stop 3 blocks away. He approached on foot, every sense alert for danger. The building appeared normal from the outside, but Jack could see a faint light coming from his office window on the 3rd floor. Using the fire escape he had installed as a secondary exit, Jack climbed silently to the roof access. He designed this building's security himself, which meant he knew every blind spot and vulnerability. Through the skylight, he could see 2 figures in his office. Christina was photographing documents from his safe, while a man he didn't recognize worked at his computer. This wasn't a simple case of infidelity. This was corporate espionage on a personal level. Jack's jaw tightened as he watched his wife of 8 years systematically violate his trust and his business. The documents she was photographing contained detailed security assessments for several high-profile clients, including federal judges, senators, and Fortune 500 CEOs. In the wrong hands, that information could be used for blackmail, assassination, or worse. The man at the computer looked up and said something Jack couldn't hear. Christina nodded and pulled out her phone, dialing a number. "It's done," she said, her voice carrying up through the building's acoustics. "We have everything we need. The client list, the security protocols, even his personal financial information." Jack felt a cold rage building in his chest. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about destroying everything he'd built. "Morgan's buyer will pay top dollar for this intelligence," Christina continued, "especially the federal judge assignments. Once we have Jack out of the picture, there won't be anyone to trace it back to us." The phrase "Jack out of the picture" sent alarm bells ringing in his mind. This wasn't just theft. This was the prelude to something much more sinister. Jack retreated from the skylight and made his way back to street level. He had seen enough to understand that his life was in immediate danger, but he needed more information before he could act. His military training had taught him that rushing into battle without proper intelligence was the fastest way to get killed. As he drove back to the penthouse, Jack's mind was already formulating a plan. He'd spent his career hunting dangerous enemies in hostile territory. Now, the most dangerous enemies were sleeping in his bed and wearing a badge in his city. The game had changed, but Jack Leyva had never lost a war. He didn't intend to start now. Chapter 2. The Web Unravels. Jack spent the next 3 days playing the perfect husband while conducting the most important reconnaissance mission of his life. He smiled at Christina over breakfast, kissed her goodbye when she left for client meetings, and maintained the facade of domestic bliss while gathering intelligence that painted an increasingly dark picture. The man in his office was Dario Martino, a former NSA contractor who'd been discharged for selling classified information. Jack's contacts in the intelligence community confirmed that Martino specialized in extracting and selling sensitive data to the highest bidder. The fact that Christina had recruited someone of his caliber meant this operation had been planned for months, possibly years. Jack's investigation into Morgan Broom's activities revealed a police chief with expensive tastes and mounting debts. Morgan's wife, Teresa Stewart, came from oil money, but their marriage was reportedly on the rocks due to his gambling addiction and serial infidelity. The man had motive, means, and opportunity to monetize sensitive information. But it was the financial trail that revealed the true scope of the betrayal. Christina had been systematically moving money out of their joint accounts into offshore holdings. Not just thousands, millions. Money that represented Jack's entire life savings, his business equity, and his retirement fund. The pattern suggested a long-term extraction plan. Christina wasn't just having an affair with Morgan. She was systematically destroying Jack's life while building a new one for herself. On the fourth night, Jack's surveillance equipment captured the conversation that confirmed his worst fears. Christina was in their bedroom, on a secure call with Morgan. Jack listened from his hidden monitoring station in the building's utility room. "The buyer wants confirmation that Jack won't be a problem." Morgan's voice crackled through the encrypted communication device. $3 million is a lot of money for information that could be traced back to us. "He won't be a problem much longer," Christina replied, her voice cold in a way Jack had never heard before. "I've already made contact with Hans Heinrich. He's handled permanent solutions for several of my clients who had difficult husbands." Jack's blood turned to ice. Hans Heinrich was a name from his military intelligence files. A professional assassin who specialized in making murders look like accidents or random crimes. "When?" Morgan asked. "Tomorrow night. Jack has a client meeting at the Riverside parking garage. Heinrich will be waiting. It'll look like a robbery gone wrong. Very tragic, very random. And then we disappear. The Cayman accounts are already established. Your divorce from Teresa will be finalized next month, and we'll be living very comfortably in a non-extradition country while the federal authorities try to figure out how their security protocols ended up on the dark web." Jack disconnected the feed and sat in the darkness, processing what he'd learned. His wife wasn't just cheating on him. She was planning to have him murdered for money. The woman he'd trusted with his life was selling him to the highest bidder. But Christina had made one critical error in her planning. She'd underestimated exactly who she was trying to kill. Jack Leyva had survived Taliban ambushes, Al-Qaeda assassination attempts, and Iranian Revolutionary Guard interrogations. He'd killed more men than he could count, often with nothing but his bare hands and his training. Christina and Morgan were about to learn that there was a significant difference between a civilian target and a former Navy SEAL who knew he was being hunted. The next morning, Jack played his role perfectly. He kissed Christina goodbye, told her he loved her, and left for his client meeting at the Riverside parking garage. But instead of driving to the meeting, Jack positioned himself 3 blocks away with a clear view of the garage entrance. Hans Heinrich arrived at 7:30 p.m., driving a stolen sedan and carrying what appeared to be a silenced pistol. He was a professional, but Jack had been hunting professionals for 15 years. Jack waited until Heinrich was in position, then approached from the assassin's blind spot. The confrontation was brief and decisive. Heinrich never saw Jack coming. When Heinrich's phone rang 20 minutes later, Jack answered it. "Is it done?" Christina's voice whispered through the speaker. Jack looked down at Heinrich's lifeless body and felt no remorse. The man had come to murder him for money. In Jack's world, that was a death sentence. "He failed," Jack replied in a low voice, disguising his tone. "Meet me at the penthouse." There was a long pause. "What? Who is this?" "Your husband. And we need to talk." The line went dead, but Jack knew Christina would come. She had no choice. Her plan had failed, her assassin was dead, and Jack was very much alive. Now it was time for Christina and Morgan to learn that betraying a Navy SEAL had consequences that went far beyond divorce court. Jack drove home through the city streets, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The reconnaissance phase was over. The planning phase was complete. Now came the part Jack had always excelled at, the execution. As he pulled into the penthouse garage, Jack smiled for the first time in months. Christina and Morgan thought they were above the law. They thought they could destroy him and disappear into the sunset with their stolen millions. They were about to discover that Jack Leyva had become judge, jury, and executioner. And in his court, there was only one sentence for betrayal. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. Jack entered his penthouse with the calm precision of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire adult life. He had 45 minutes before Christina and Morgan arrived, which was more than enough time to transform his home into a controlled environment. The penthouse's security system was his own design: military-grade cameras, reinforced locks, and signal jammers that could isolate the building from all outside communication. Tonight, those systems would serve a different purpose than protection. They would ensure that whatever happened in the next few hours remained private. Jack changed into black, tactical clothing and began methodically preparing the space. Furniture was moved to create clear sight lines. Weapons were positioned at strategic locations. The elevator was programmed to stop only at the penthouse level, and the stairwell access was electronically sealed. By the time Christina's key turned in the lock, Jack was ready. She entered with Morgan at her side, both of them moving with the nervous energy of people who knew their carefully laid plans had gone catastrophically wrong. Christina was still beautiful, her dark hair perfectly styled, her designer dress impeccable. But Jack could see the fear in her eyes as she scanned the room. Morgan Broom looked every inch the corrupt police chief he'd become. At 51, he let himself go soft around the middle, but he still carried the arrogance of a man accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room. That was about to change. "Hello, darling," Jack said from the shadows near the bar. His voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I was wondering when you'd get here." Christina spun toward the sound, her face pale. "Jack, what's going on? Your text was confusing and—" "My text?" Jack stepped into the light, and both visitors could see he was armed. "I think you're confused, Christina. We both know you weren't expecting to see me alive tonight." Morgan's hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon, but Jack was faster. The sound of Jack's pistol cocking echoed through the room. "I wouldn't, Chief. You're a civilian now. This is my house, my rules." "Listen, Jack," Morgan began, his politician's voice smooth and reasonable. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Christina called me because she was worried about you. She said you've been acting strange, paranoid." "Strange and paranoid," Jack repeated, his smile cold. "Like installing surveillance equipment in my own home?" Like discovering that my wife has been photographing classified documents from my safe? Like learning that she's been working with a disgraced NSA contractor to sell federal security protocols to foreign buyers? The color drained from Christina's face. Jack, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let's talk about Hans Heinrich. Morgan's confident facade cracked. The name meant nothing to him, but Christina's reaction told Jack everything he needed to know. You remember Hans, don't you, sweetheart? Professional assassin? Supposed to make me disappear tonight, so you and the chief here could live happily ever after on my money? You don't understand, Christina said, her voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The business with the documents, that was just, we needed money and murder was the logical next step. Jack's voice hardened. You want to know what I understand, Christina? I understand that you've been planning to kill me for months. I understand that you've stolen $3.7 million from our accounts. I understand that you've been selling intelligence that could get federal judges killed. Jack pulled out Heinrich's phone and tossed it onto the coffee table. I also understand that Hans Heinrich won't be making any more house calls. The implication hung in air like a death sentence. Morgan finally found his voice. You killed him. He came to my parking garage with a silenced pistol and orders to murder me. In my world, that's called justifiable homicide. Jack, Christina pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Please, we can fix this. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. I love you. Love. Jack's laugh was harsh. You hired a professional killer to put a bullet in my head. That's not love, Christina. That's something else entirely. Morgan shifted nervously, his eyes calculating escape routes. Look, this has gone too far. I'm calling for backup. With what? Jack held up a signal jammer. This penthouse is completely isolated. No cell service, no landlines, no internet. The only way out is through me. The reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. They were trapped 40 stories above the city with a man they tried to murder, and nobody was coming to save them. What do you want? Morgan asked, his voice now showing the first signs of genuine fear. Jack walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. What do I want? That's an interesting question, Chief. I want our money back, obviously. I want the documents you've stolen. I want the names of everyone involved in this operation. He turned back to face them. But mostly I want justice. We can give you everything, Christina said quickly. The money, the documents, all of it. We'll disappear, and you'll never see us again. Jack studied his wife's face. The face he'd kissed goodnight for 8 years. The face that had smiled at him while planning his death. You know what the difference is between you and me, Christina? When I killed people, it was for my country. When I ended lives, it was to protect innocent civilians from terrorists and enemies of the state. There was honor in it, purpose. His voice grew quieter, more dangerous. But you were willing to kill me for money. Pure, simple greed. And that makes you something I've spent my entire career hunting. Jack, please. I've been thinking about this for the past few hours, Jack continued. About justice, about consequences, about what happens to people who betray everything they're supposed to hold sacred. He looked at Morgan, then back at Christina. And I've come to a decision. You both wanted me dead so you could steal my life and disappear. Well, congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you wanted. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Just not the way you planned it. Jack moved toward them with the predatory grace of a man who had spent years perfecting the art of controlled violence. The hunt was over. Now came the judgment, and Jack Leyva had never been more certain of a verdict in his life. Chapter 4. The Price of Betrayal. The next 6 hours would be remembered by Jack Leyva as the longest and most necessary night of his life. What happened in that penthouse went far beyond simple revenge. It was a systematic dismantling of the conspiracy that had tried to destroy him. Jack had learned patience in the military. He'd learned that information extracted under pressure was often more valuable than any immediate satisfaction. So he began methodically, starting with Morgan Broom. Let's start with something simple. Chief, the buyers. Who were you selling my client information to? Morgan's initial bravado had evaporated completely. Faced with the reality of being trapped with a man they tried to murder, The police chief found his courage significantly diminished. It was just one contact, he said. A broker who dealt with international clients. Names. I don't know his real name. He went by Keandre Cornwell. Met through encrypted channels, payments in cryptocurrency. Jack made a note. He would track down Keandre Cornwell later. What else were you selling besides my files? The truth came out in fragments. Morgan had been corrupting the police department for over 2 years, selling information about ongoing investigations, witness protection details, and evidence from high-profile cases. The scope of his crimes went far beyond adultery and attempted murder. The federal judges, Jack continued, what exactly were you planning to sell about them? Christina answered this time, her voice barely above a whisper. Personal security schedules, travel plans, home addresses. One of Morgan's contacts said they would pay $5 million for complete vulnerability assessments on 3 specific judges. Which judges? The names they provided made Jack's blood run cold. These weren't just any federal judges. These were the 3 justices who were scheduled to hear cases involving organized crime and international terrorism. Someone was planning assassinations. Jesus Christ, Jack breathed. You weren't just stealing from me. You were setting up hits on federal judges. We didn't know. Morgan protested. The buyer never said what they wanted the information for. You knew exactly what it was for, Jack snapped. Nobody pays $5 million for information they plan to use legally. As the night progressed, the full scope of the conspiracy emerged. Christina had been recruited 18 months ago by a woman named Jolie Gossett, who ran a high-end escort service that catered to powerful men. Jolie's real business was intelligence gathering, using her girls to extract information from clients and selling it to the highest bidders. Christina's interior design business had been the perfect cover. She had access to the homes and offices of senators, judges, business leaders, and foreign diplomats. She'd been photographing documents, installing listening devices, and mapping security systems for over a year. How many homes? Jack asked. 17, Christina admitted. Senators, judges, 2 cabinet members, and several Fortune 500 CEOs. Jack felt sick. His wife hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd betrayed national security on a massive scale. The information she'd gathered could compromise ongoing investigations, endanger lives, and potentially alter the balance of power in several international conflicts. The money, he continued. How much have you made from this? $12 million, Morgan said. Split 3 ways between me, Christina, and Jolie. Jack did the math. That means there's still $8.3 million in the accounts you haven't moved yet. Most of it's in escrow, Christina explained. The buyers don't pay until the information is verified and delivered. And my murder was supposed to be the final delivery? She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Jack walked to his safe and removed a secure satellite phone, one that couldn't be jammed or traced by conventional means. He had calls to make, but first he needed to secure the evidence. Here's what's going to happen, he told his prisoners. You're going to give me every password, every account number, every contact, and every piece of information about this operation. Then you're going to help me contact your buyers and arrange a meeting. Jack, you don't understand, Morgan pleaded. These people aren't just criminals. They're international players, Russian oligarchs, Chinese intelligence operatives, Middle Eastern terror financiers. If we betray them, they'll kill us all. They were going to kill me anyway, Jack pointed out. The difference is, now I'm in control. Jack spent the next 2 hours extracting every detail of the operation. Account numbers, contact methods, delivery schedules, and most importantly, the identities of everyone involved. The network was larger than he'd initially suspected. Corrupt officials, compromised business leaders, and foreign agents operating throughout the government. But it was Christina's next revelation that changed everything. There's something else, she said, her voice breaking. About your clients. The security assessments you've been doing, some of them weren't random assignments. Jack stopped typing. What do you mean? Jolie's been feeding you specific clients. People who had information or access that our buyers wanted. You've been unknowingly helping us map targets for over 2 years. The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. His entire business had been compromised. Every security assessment he'd conducted, Every vulnerability he'd identified, every protection protocol he'd designed, all of it had been systematically compromised and sold to hostile parties. How many clients? All of them, Christina whispered. Every single client you've had for the past 2 years was chosen because they had something someone wanted to steal or someone wanted to hurt. Jack felt the full weight of the betrayal crushing down on him. This wasn't just about his marriage or his money. This was about every person he'd sworn to protect, every family whose security he'd guaranteed, every life that was now in danger because he'd trusted the wrong woman. The rage that built in Jack's chest was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was cold, pure, and absolutely lethal. "You've just graduated from theft and attempted murder," he told them quietly. "You're now accessories to potential treason and terrorism." Jack picked up his satellite phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. "Colonel Martinez? This is Commander Leyva. I need to report a national security breach." As Jack began explaining the situation to his former commanding officer, he watched Christina and Morgan's faces go white with terror. They were beginning to understand that this had gone far beyond a domestic dispute. They had betrayed national security, endangered federal judges, and compromised ongoing intelligence operations. The consequences wouldn't be handled in divorce court or even criminal court. This was now a matter of national security, and Jack Leyva was no longer just a betrayed husband seeking revenge. He was a patriot protecting his country from enemies foreign and domestic. And the penalty for treason had never changed. Chapter 5. The Hunter Unleashed. Dawn was breaking over the city when Colonel Martinez arrived at the penthouse with a team of military intelligence operatives. Jack had spent the remaining hours of the night extracting every piece of information from Christina and Morgan, building a complete picture of the conspiracy that had nearly cost him his life. The operation was bigger than anyone had imagined. The network included 17 compromised officials, 34 targeted individuals, and connections to intelligence services from 6 different countries. What had started as a personal betrayal had evolved into one of the largest counterintelligence operations in recent memory. "Commander," Colonel Martinez said as his team began securing the evidence, "we've confirmed the identities of the buyers. The information your wife extracted was being sold to a syndicate that includes Russian SVR, Iranian Quds Force, and Chinese MSS operatives." Jack wasn't surprised. The scope of the intelligence gathering had suggested state-level actors from the beginning. "What's the damage assessment?" "Bad. 3 federal judges have been reassigned to secure locations. 2 senators are in protective custody. And we've had to assume that every security protocol you've designed in the past 2 years has been compromised." Jack felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Every vulnerability assessment he'd conducted, every protection plan he'd created, every security weakness he'd identified, all of it was now in the hands of America's enemies. Martinez continued, "But there's good news. With the intelligence you've provided, we can turn this into an opportunity. The buyers are expecting delivery of the judge vulnerability assessments tomorrow. We're going to give them exactly what they want. A trap. The biggest counterintelligence sting in a decade. We'll use the meeting to identify and neutralize the entire network." Jack looked at Christina and Morgan, who were being processed by the intelligence team. "And them?" "That depends on you, Commander. They've cooperated fully, which counts for something. But treason is still treason." Jack considered his options. In his years as a SEAL, he'd learned that justice sometimes came in forms that courts couldn't provide. These 2 had betrayed not just him, but everyone they'd sworn to protect. "I want to be part of the operation," Jack said. "The buyers know Christina and Morgan. They'll be expecting them at the meeting." "Absolutely not. You're too close to this, and, Colonel, with respect, they try to murder me. This is personal now, and personal means I have motivation that your operatives can't match." Martinez studied Jack's face for a long moment. "What are you proposing?" "Christina and Morgan go to the meeting as planned. But instead of delivering intelligence, they deliver me." The plan that Jack outlined was audacious and dangerous. Instead of simply arresting the buyers, they would penetrate the entire network by allowing Jack to pose as a corrupt intelligence asset willing to sell even more valuable information. "It's too risky," Martinez protested. If they discover you're military. They won't, because Christina and Morgan are going to sell me as their new partner. A former SEAL who's decided to cash in on his knowledge and connections. Jack pulled out a file he'd prepared during the night. I've got access to active SEAL team operational plans, CIA asset lists, and Pentagon security protocols. Information that's worth 50 times what they were paying for judge schedules. You're talking about using yourself as bait. I'm talking about ending this network permanently. These people tried to kill me, Colonel. They've compromised national security and endangered American lives. I want all of them. Martinez was quiet for several minutes, considering the proposal. Finally, he nodded. We'll need 3 days to set up the operation. Can you maintain your cover that long? I've been maintaining cover for the past month. 3 more days won't be a problem. What Jack didn't tell the colonel was that he had his own agenda for the operation. The military would handle the national security aspects, but Jack had personal scores to settle. Hans Heinrich was dead, but the people who'd hired him were still breathing. That was a problem Jack intended to solve permanently. Over the next 72 hours, Jack transformed himself into the perfect double agent. He studied the files of the buyers, memorized their names and faces, and prepared intelligence packages that appeared genuine but contained carefully crafted disinformation. Christina and Morgan, now fully cooperative and terrified of the consequences if they refused, practiced their roles as his partners in corruption. They would present Jack as a former SEAL who'd become disillusioned with military life and was willing to sell his knowledge to the highest bidder. You understand, Jack told them on the night before the meeting. If you betray me during this operation, if you try to warn the buyers or escape, you won't live to see a courtroom. We understand, Christina whispered. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. I don't think you do, Jack replied. Let me be absolutely clear. These people wanted me dead. You helped them. The only reason you're still alive is because you're useful to me now. The moment you stop being useful, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The meeting was set for the next evening at a warehouse in the industrial district. Jack would go in wearing enough hidden surveillance equipment to document every participant, but he would be essentially alone against a room full of trained killers and intelligence operatives. It was exactly the kind of mission he'd trained for his entire adult life. As Jack prepared his weapons and equipment, he felt the familiar calm that came before combat. His personal life was destroyed, his business was compromised, and his wife had tried to have him murdered. But he was still alive, still dangerous, and still committed to protecting his country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Tomorrow night, he would walk into a room full of those enemies and remind them exactly why Navy SEALs were the most feared warriors in the world. The hunt was about to reach its climax, and Jack Leyva had never been more ready for a fight. Chapter 6. Into the Lion's Den. The warehouse district looked like a scene from a war zone. Abandoned buildings, broken streetlights, and the kind of desolation that made perfect cover for illegal activities. Jack approached the meeting location with the controlled confidence of a man who had walked into enemy territory dozens of times before. He wore a tailored suit that concealed body armor and enough weapons to start a small war. The surveillance equipment hidden on his body was military-grade, designed to survive firefights and explosions. If things went wrong, the intelligence community would at least have recordings of everyone involved. Christina and Morgan flanked him as they entered the warehouse, both of them nervous but playing their roles. To outside observers, they looked like a corrupt police chief, a traitorous wife, and her former Special Forces husband who decided to cash in on his military knowledge. The reality was considerably more complex. Inside the warehouse, Jack counted 12 individuals representing what appeared to be a United Nations of criminal intelligence. He recognized several faces from classified briefings, Russian operatives, Chinese agents, Iranian intelligence officers, and what appeared to be representatives from organized crime syndicates. At the center of the group stood a woman Jack immediately identified as Jolie Gossett. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of beauty that could open doors and extract secrets. But her eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who'd made a career of manipulating powerful men. "So, this is the famous Jack Leyva," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that could have been European or Middle Eastern. The Navy SEAL who's decided to join the private sector. Former Navy SEAL, Jack corrected. I found out recently that my government doesn't pay nearly as well as alternative employers. Jolie smiled. Yes, your wife mentioned that you'd had some financial revelations. We're always interested in recruiting men with your particular skill set. Around the room, Jack cataloged potential threats. 2 Russians who moved like Spetsnaz operatives. A Chinese man whose bearing suggested military intelligence training. An Iranian who kept his hand near what was obviously a concealed weapon. Several others who looked like professional killers. Any one of them could probably handle Morgan in a straight fight. Together, they represented more concentrated lethality than most military units. Jack was exactly where he wanted to be. Before we discuss terms, said one of the Russians, stepping forward, we need assurance that this isn't some kind of setup. Your story is convenient. Convenient how? Jack asked. American SEAL discovers wife's infidelity, becomes disillusioned with military service, decides to sell secrets for money. It's very Hollywood. Jack laughed, and the sound carried genuine menace. You think this is Hollywood? 3 days ago, I killed a professional assassin with my bare hands after my wife hired him to murder me. Last night, I held these 2 at gunpoint for 6 hours while they told me everything about your operation. Does that sound like a movie to you? He pulled out his phone and showed them photographs of Hans Heinrich's body. Your friend Heinrich won't be taking any more contracts. The Russian's expression changed. Heinrich had been well known in their circles, and his death sent a clear message about Jack's capabilities. Now, Jack continued, let's talk business. You've been buying scraps, security assessments, travel schedules, personal information. I'm offering you the real thing. Current SEAL team operational plans, CIA asset networks, Pentagon security protocols. He placed a briefcase on the table. Sample. Jolie opened the case and began examining the documents inside. Jack had crafted them carefully, real enough to pass initial inspection, but containing enough disinformation to compromise any operation that relied on them. These are impressive, she admitted after several minutes. If genuine, they would be worth considerable money. $50 million, Jack said, for the complete package. Several of the buyers shifted uncomfortably. It was an enormous sum, but the intelligence Jack was offering would be worth hundreds of millions to hostile governments. We'll need verification, the Chinese operative said. Some of these documents reference operations that haven't been publicly acknowledged, which is why I'm charging $50 million instead of $5, Jack replied. Anyone can steal public information. I'm offering you intelligence that could change the balance of power in 3 different conflicts. The negotiation continued for over an hour, with Jack playing his role perfectly. He was arrogant, greedy, and convincingly bitter about his treatment by the military. To the buyers, he appeared to be exactly what they'd hoped to find, a highly placed American asset willing to betray his country for money. What they didn't realize was that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to a military intelligence team positioned 3 blocks away. Names, faces, operational details, payment methods. Everything was being recorded and analyzed in real time. We have an agreement, in principle, Jolie finally announced. $50 million for the complete intelligence package, delivered in increments over the next 6 months. Half up front, Jack insisted. $25 million in untraceable cryptocurrency, transferred before I hand over the first batch of operational plans. Acceptable. We'll need 3 days to arrange the initial transfer. Jack nodded. Then we meet again Friday night. Same location. As the meeting began to break up, the Iranian operative approached Jack privately. You interest me, Mr. Leva. A man who can kill Heinrich and walk away is someone we should know better. Business is business, Jack replied. Personal feelings don't enter into it. Still, Heinrich was very good at his job. How exactly did you eliminate him? Jack's smile was cold. He made the mistake of thinking he was hunting a civilian. I've been hunting professionals like him for 15 years. It wasn't much of a contest. The Iranian nodded approvingly. Perhaps we should discuss additional arrangements. My employers are always in need of men with your particular talents. I'm listening. There are certain individuals, American officials, military officers, business leaders, who have become problems for our operations. We pay very well for permanent solutions to such problems. Jack pretended to consider the offer. We can discuss that after this deal is complete. I don't like to complicate business relationships. As they left the warehouse, Jack felt the familiar satisfaction of a successful reconnaissance mission. He had names, faces, operational details, and recorded evidence of foreign intelligence officers soliciting the murder of American officials. But more importantly, he now knew exactly who had tried to destroy his life. The meeting on Friday would be very different from what the buyers expected. Instead of receiving American intelligence secrets, they would be walking into the most comprehensive counterintelligence trap in recent history. And Jack Leva would be there to personally ensure that justice was served. The game was almost over, and Jack held all the cards. Chapter 7. The Trap Closes. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable fog rolling in from the harbor, providing perfect cover for the military teams positioning themselves around the warehouse district. Jack reviewed the operational plans one final time as he prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous night of his life. Colonel Martinez had assembled an impressive force, 2 SEAL teams, FBI counterintelligence operatives, and a specialized unit from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The warehouse would be surrounded, but Jack would still be alone inside with 12 trained killers until the trap was sprung. "Remember, Commander," Martinez said over the secure radio, "your job is to get them all inside and keep them talking until we have positive identification on every participant. Don't be a hero." Jack checked his weapons one final time. "Define hero, Colonel." "Someone who gets killed trying to do everyone else's job." Jack laughed grimly. "Understood." Christina and Morgan were pale and silent as they drove to the meeting. They understood that their lives depended on their performance tonight, and that Jack would not hesitate to kill them if they betrayed the operation. "Just remember," Jack told them, "these people wanted me dead. They were willing to pay for your services, and they would have killed you too once you became inconvenient. Tonight is your chance to do something right for once in your lives." The warehouse looked the same as it had 3 days earlier, but Jack's trained eye caught subtle differences. The buyers had posted sentries, added security cameras, and positioned vehicles for quick escape. They weren't taking any chances with a $50 million deal. Inside, the same players were assembled, but the atmosphere was noticeably tense. Large sums of money made everyone paranoid, and Jack could sense that several of the buyers were having second thoughts about the operation. "Gentlemen, lady," Jack said as he entered with his briefcase, "I trust the financial arrangements have been completed." Jolie nodded and produced a tablet showing cryptocurrency transactions. $25 million as agreed. "Your turn." Jack opened the briefcase and began laying out documents on the table. To anyone without specialized knowledge, they appear to be genuine military intelligence, operational plans, asset lists, security protocols, and tactical assessments. What the buyers didn't know was that every document contained carefully crafted disinformation designed to compromise any operation that relied on it. Real unit numbers led to fictional bases. Genuine security protocols contained fatal flaws. Asset lists included double agents and compromised operatives. "These are remarkable," the Chinese operative said after examining several documents. "This level of detail suggests access to the highest levels of American intelligence." "I told you I was worth the money," Jack replied. As the buyers continued their examination, Jack noticed increased activity outside the warehouse. The sentries were moving more frequently, and he caught glimpses of additional vehicles arriving in the area. Something was wrong. "Mr. Leva," the Russian operative said suddenly, "we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Instead of answering, the Russian pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. It showed Jack entering a military facility 3 days earlier, the same facility where he'd briefed Colonel Martinez on the operation. "This was taken by one of our assets inside the Pentagon. You've been busy since our last meeting." Jack felt the situation slipping out of control, but his expression remained calm. "I told you I was gathering additional intelligence. You can't expect $50 million worth of secrets to just be sitting in my basement." "Or," said Jolie, her voice now cold, You've been reporting to your military friends about our operation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as the buyers realized they might be walking into a trap. Hands moved toward weapons, and Jack calculated his odds of surviving the next 30 seconds. They weren't good. That's an interesting theory, Jack said. But if I were setting you up, would I be standing here alone with all of you? You're not alone, the Iranian operative said, pointing toward the windows. We count at least 24 military personnel positioned around this building. Jack smiled coldly. Then I guess we have a problem. The standoff lasted for exactly 3 seconds before chaos erupted. The Chinese operative went for his weapon first, and Jack put him down with 2 shots to the chest. The Russians dove for cover behind overturned tables while Jack rolled behind a concrete pillar, his backup weapon already in his hand. Federal agents, came the amplified voice from outside. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately. Instead of surrendering, the buyers chose to fight. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as the foreign operatives tried to shoot their way out of the trap. Jack found himself in the middle of the firefight, exactly where he'd expected to be. But instead of being the hunted, he was now the hunter in an environment he understood perfectly. The Spetsnaz operatives were professional, but they were used to fighting in their own territory with backup and support. Here, they were isolated and surrounded by superior forces. Jack systematically eliminated them with the cold efficiency of a man who'd been killing enemies of the state for 15 years. Jolie tried to use Christina as a human shield, but Jack had anticipated that move. His shot took her center mass, and she dropped without getting a chance to harm his wife. Within minutes, the firefight was over. 8 of the 12 buyers were dead, and the remaining 4 were wounded and in custody. Jack emerged from the warehouse with minor injuries and the satisfaction of a mission completed. But he wasn't finished yet. Colonel Martinez, he said into his radio, I need to speak with the survivors privately before they're processed. Jack, they're going into federal custody. There are protocols. They tried to murder me, compromised national security, and endangered the lives of federal judges. I'm requesting 5 minutes. Martinez looked at the bodies scattered around the warehouse and the wounded survivors being treated by medics. 5 minutes, Commander. But we never had this conversation. Jack approached the Iranian operative, who was conscious despite a bullet wound in his shoulder. You remember our conversation about permanent solutions to problems? The man nodded weakly. I want you to deliver a message to your employers. Tell them what happened here tonight. Tell them that Jack Leva is very much alive, very well armed, and very interested in meeting anyone else who might want to continue this business relationship. Jack leaned closer. Tell them that I'm now in the permanent solutions business myself, and I'm very good at my job. The Iranian's eyes widened with fear as he understood the implications. Jack stood and walked away, leaving the survivors to contemplate the lesson they'd learned about betraying American intelligence operatives. The trap had worked perfectly. The network was destroyed, the intelligence was secured, and the threat to national security was eliminated. But Jack's personal war was just beginning. Chapter 8. Settling Accounts. 3 weeks after the warehouse operation, Jack sat in his rebuilt office reviewing the intelligence reports from the aftermath. The counterintelligence sting had been more successful than anyone had imagined. 23 arrests across 4 countries, the disruption of 6 active operations against American interests, and the recovery of over $40 million in stolen assets. But the victory felt hollow. His marriage was destroyed, his business was in ruins, and his life had been permanently altered by the betrayal of the 2 people he'd trusted most. Christina and Morgan were in federal custody, cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for plea agreements that would keep them out of death row. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison, but they would live. Jack wasn't sure that was justice. Colonel Martinez entered the office carrying a classified file. The final intelligence assessment, he said, placing it on Jack's desk. The network was larger than we initially thought. 17 countries, over 300 compromised individuals, and connections to terrorism financing that go back 5 years. Jack opened the file and began reading. The scope of the operation was staggering. A coordinated effort to penetrate American intelligence and security operations at every level. Your wife and Morgan were small players, Martinez continued. They thought they were running a simple money-making scheme, but they were actually part of something much bigger. How much bigger? The people who recruited them have been building networks inside American intelligence for over a decade. This wasn't just about selling secrets. It was about positioning assets for a coordinated attack on American national security infrastructure. Jack looked up from the file. And now we know who they are, where they operate, and how they recruit. The damage will take years to fully assess, but we can start rebuilding. Martinez paused. There's something else. The agency has made you an offer. Jack wasn't surprised. His performance during the operation had impressed everyone involved, and his unique position as someone who'd penetrated the network made him valuable for future operations. What kind of offer? Special assignment. Hunting down the surviving members of the network. Full authority, unlimited resources, and complete operational independence. It was exactly the kind of mission Jack had been trained for. Hunting enemies of the state in hostile territory with minimal support and maximum lethality. The chance to personally eliminate everyone who'd been involved in the conspiracy to destroy his life. I accept. Martinez smiled. I thought you might. There's one condition, though. This is a black operation. Officially, you died in the warehouse firefight. Jack Leva, the civilian, is gone forever. Jack nodded. He'd expected as much. The man who'd lived in the penthouse with Christina, who'd built a security consulting business, who believed in marriage and domestic happiness. That man was already dead. What remained was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Over the next 6 months, Jack Leva systematically hunted down every surviving member of the network that had tried to destroy him. He operated in the shadows, moving between countries like a ghost, eliminating targets with the precision of a master assassin. In Prague, he found a Czech arms dealer who'd supplied weapons to Heinrich. The man's death was made to look like a robbery gone wrong. In Damascus, he eliminated the Syrian intelligence officer who'd coordinated the recruitment of American assets. A car bomb that appeared to be the work of local rebels. In Moscow, he cornered the Russian operative who'd overseen the financial aspects of the operation. A heart attack caused by an untraceable poison that mimicked natural causes. Each operation was carefully planned and flawlessly executed. Jack had become the kind of enemy that intelligence operatives feared most, someone with official backing, unlimited resources, and a personal motivation that made him absolutely relentless. But it was the final target that provided the most satisfaction. Keandre Cornwell, the broker who'd coordinated the sale of American intelligence secrets, had gone into hiding after the warehouse operation. It took Jack 4 months to track him to a heavily fortified compound in Montenegro. The compound was protected by professional security, electronic surveillance, and enough firepower to hold off a small army. It was exactly the kind of target Jack had been eliminating for years. He approached at dawn, moving through the surrounding forest with the patience of a predator. The security team was good, but they were protecting against conventional threats. They weren't prepared for a Navy SEAL with a personal grudge and official authorization to use any means necessary. Jack eliminated the perimeter guards silently, disabled the electronic surveillance, and infiltrated the compound without triggering a single alarm. By the time Keandre realized he was under attack, Jack was already inside his bedroom. "You remember me?" Jack asked quietly. Keandre was a small man in his 50s, soft from years of comfortable living off other people's betrayals. He looked at Jack with the terrified recognition of someone who knew his crimes had finally caught up with him. "Jack Leva, but you're supposed to be dead." "I was, but I got better." Jack sat down in a chair facing the bed, his weapon trained on Keandre's chest. "We need to talk about Heinrich and my wife, and the $50 million you were willing to pay for intelligence that could have gotten federal judges killed." "It was just business," Keandre pleaded. "Nothing personal. You tried to have me murdered. You corrupted my wife. You compromised American national security. That feels pretty personal to me." Jack pulled out a file containing photographs of everyone who died as a result of the intelligence network's activities. Federal agents, foreign assets, intelligence operatives, and innocent civilians who'd been killed to protect the conspiracy. 37 people are dead because of the network you helped run. American agents, foreign assets who are helping us, civilians who got in the way. Their blood is on your hands. Keandre looked at the photographs and began to weep. I never intended for anyone to die. It was just supposed to be information sales. Information that was used to plan assassinations, terrorist attacks, and military operations against American interests. You can't sell intelligence to America's enemies and pretend you don't know what they're going to do with it. Jack stood up and moved closer to the bed. But here's what really makes this personal. You didn't just corrupt my wife. You turned her into a traitor. She betrayed everything she was supposed to believe in because you offered her money. She came to us willingly. We didn't force her. No, but you exploited her weaknesses. You found someone who was vulnerable, and you turned her into a weapon against her own country. Jack's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. And that makes you responsible for destroying everything I cared about. The execution was quick and professional. Keandre Cornwell died, knowing that his network was destroyed, his associates were dead, and his life's work had been turned against him. Jack walked out of the compound as the sun rose over the Montenegrin mountains, feeling a sense of completion he hadn't experienced since the night his life was destroyed. The network was eliminated. The threat was neutralized. Justice had been served. But Jack Leva, the man who believed in marriage and domestic happiness, was gone forever. What remained was a ghost in the service of his country, hunting enemies in the shadows and ensuring that betrayal carried the ultimate price. He had become exactly what Christina and Morgan had tried to destroy: judge, jury, and executioner. And he was very good at his job. Chapter 9. Final Justice. 2 years after the warehouse operation that ended his old life, Jack Leva stood in a secure briefing room in Langley, Virginia, reviewing the final report on Operation Broken Trust. The classified document contained the complete accounting of the intelligence network that had tried to destroy him. 247 identified operatives, 89 confirmed eliminations, and the disruption of operations in 23 countries. The man who had once been a civilian security consultant was now one of the CIA's most effective operational assets, responsible for more successful terminations than any other single agent in the past decade. He operated under deep cover with multiple identities, moving through the international intelligence community like a force of nature. But today's meeting wasn't about his operational success. It was about unfinished business. There's one more target on the list, Colonel Martinez said, now promoted to Deputy Director of Operations. Someone we've saved for last. He placed a classified file on the table. The photograph showed a woman Jack recognized immediately. Teresa Stewart, Morgan Broom's ex-wife and the heir to a petroleum fortune worth over $2 billion. We've discovered that Teresa wasn't the innocent victim we initially believed. She was the primary financier of the intelligence network, using her oil money to fund operations against American interests for over 6 years. Jack studied the file. Teresa had used her family's legitimate business connections to provide cover for money laundering, arms dealing, and intelligence brokering on a massive scale. Her marriage to Morgan had been a cover story designed to place an asset inside American law enforcement. She played the role of the betrayed wife perfectly, Martinez continued. Made it look like Morgan was cheating on her and gambling away their money, when in reality, she was funding the entire operation. The implications were staggering. Teresa Stewart had orchestrated the corruption of her own husband, the recruitment of Jack's wife, and the attempt on his life. She was the architect of everything that had destroyed his life. Where is she now? Switzerland. She's been living under diplomatic protection as a cultural attaché to some minor European principality that doesn't really exist. She thinks she's untouchable. Jack closed the file. She's wrong. This is a delicate operation, Jack. Teresa has connections to legitimate governments, international banks, and intelligence services from friendly nations. If this goes wrong, it could create serious diplomatic problems. It won't go wrong. Martinez studied Jack's face for a long moment. There's something else. Christina has been requesting to see you. Jack's expression didn't change, but Martinez caught the slight tightening around his eyes. She's in protective custody at a federal facility in Colorado. Maximum security, but she's been cooperative with ongoing investigations. She claims she has information about other networks, people we haven't identified yet. And, and she says she won't talk to anyone but you. She wants to apologize. Jack was quiet for several minutes, considering the request. His wife had betrayed everything he believed in, had tried to have him murdered, had sold American secrets to hostile foreign powers. She was serving 3 consecutive life sentences and would never see freedom again. Set up the meeting, he said finally. After I deal with Teresa. The flight to Switzerland took 14 hours, giving Jack time to study Teresa's security arrangements and plan his approach. She was living in a fortified chateau in the Swiss Alps, protected by a team of former Israeli Mossad operatives and enough electronic surveillance to monitor a small city. But Jack had spent 2 years perfecting the art of eliminating well-protected targets. Teresa Stewart had money and connections, but she didn't have the one thing that might have saved her. She didn't have experience being hunted by someone who was better at killing than she was at hiding. The operation took 3 days of preparation. Jack infiltrated the chateau's service staff, compromised their security systems, and identified every weakness in their defensive perimeter. When he finally moved against the target, it was with the methodical efficiency of a man who'd eliminated 89 similar targets without ever being detected. Teresa died in her sleep from what appeared to be a heart attack brought on by a rare allergic reaction to medication she'd been taking for years. The Swiss authorities would find no evidence of foul play, no trace of foreign substances, and no indication that anyone had been in her room. Jack was already on a plane back to the United States when her body was discovered. The meeting with Christina took place in a secure conference room at the federal facility in Colorado. She looked older than her 36 years, her beauty faded by 2 years in prison and the weight of what she'd done. "Hello, Jack," she said quietly. He didn't respond immediately, studying the woman who'd once been the center of his world. She wore prison clothing and no makeup, her hands shaking slightly as she sat across from him. "You wanted to apologize," he said finally. "I wanted to explain, to try to make you understand why I did what I did. You did it for money. There's nothing complicated about that." Christina shook her head. "It wasn't about money. Not at first. Jolie recruited me by telling me that you were having an affair, that you were planning to leave me, that you'd already started moving money out of our accounts." Jack's expression didn't change, but he felt a familiar cold anger building in his chest. She had photographs, phone records, bank statements. All of it fabricated, but I didn't know that. I thought you were betraying me, so I decided to protect myself. By committing treason, by gathering information I could use in a divorce proceeding. That's how it started, just photographing documents that might be useful in court. But then Jolie showed me how much money foreign buyers would pay for the same information. Christina looked down at her hands. By the time I realized what I was really doing, I was in too deep to stop. "They owe me, Jack, and they convinced me that you'd never forgive me if you found out. So you decided to have me killed. That was Morgan's idea. He said it was the only way to keep us both safe, that you'd eventually discover what we'd done and destroy us both." Jack leaned back in his chair. "And you believed him. I was terrified. Of you, of them, of what would happen if the truth came out. I made the worst decision of my life because I was scared and stupid, and I thought I was protecting myself. From your husband who loved you." Christina began to cry. I know how wrong I was, how evil what I did was. I've had 2 years to think about it, to understand that everything I believed was a lie designed to manipulate me. And now you want forgiveness." "No," she said, looking up at him. "I want you to know that I understand what I destroyed, that I know I don't deserve forgiveness, that I know you're never going to be able to trust anyone again because of what I did to you." Jack stood up to leave. "Jack, wait. There's one more thing. Information about networks we didn't identify, people who are still active." He stopped. "What people?" Jolie had contacts inside the Pentagon, people we never met. High-ranking military officers who were selling information about weapons programs, troop movements, classified research. They're still out there. Christina pulled out a piece of paper with names and contact information. "I've been working with the FBI to identify them, but they want more than I can give them. They want someone on the inside, someone who can get close to these people. Jack took the paper and examined the names. 3 were familiar, Pentagon officials he'd met during his military service. Why are you giving me this? Because I want to do something right. Because maybe if I help stop them, it will mean something. It won't make up for what I did, but it might save other people from getting hurt. Jack folded the paper and put it in his pocket. It doesn't change anything between us. I know. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. You'll never see freedom again, never have a family, never have any kind of normal life. I know, and I'll never forgive what you did. Not the betrayal, not the treason, not the attempt on my life. Never. Christina nodded. I understand. Jack walked toward the door, then stopped. But I want you to know that the Jack Leva you married, the man who would have forgiven you and tried to rebuild our marriage, that man is dead. You killed him the night you hired Heinrich. What are you now? Jack looked back at her one final time. I'm what you made me. Judge, jury, and executioner. And I'm very good at my job. He left the federal facility and drove into the Colorado mountains, feeling the weight of the past 2 years settling on his shoulders. His old life was gone forever, destroyed by the betrayal of the 2 people he'd trusted most. His wife would die in prison. Her lover was already dead, and the network that had tried to destroy him was eliminated. Justice had been served, but Jack Leva felt no satisfaction in it. He'd become exactly what Christina and Morgan had forced him to become, a weapon in service to his country, eliminating enemies who thought they were above the law. As he drove through the mountain passes, Jack's secure phone rang with a new assignment. More targets, more enemies of the state, more people who thought betrayal carried no consequences. Jack Leva answered the call and disappeared back into the shadows where he belonged. The final judgment had been rendered, and the sentence was death for anyone who dared betray the country he'd sworn to protect. In his world, there was no forgiveness for traitors. There was only justice.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.